So I'm going to share a little bit about myself before we get going for those that have not been on our virtual tours before. And I want to welcome back everybody who comes repeatedly and week after week. My name again is Mara Walsh. I'm in the United States and specifically between Philadelphia and New York. I just want to say that thank you all for joining us. I know that some of you may be missing this start time because of our daylight savings time. I know it kind of hit us by surprise this weekend in terms of the time frame. So hopefully everybody adjusted their local time and they're joining us at the right time. But if not, you're going to see the recording. So welcome either way. I started leading physical tours with EF Tours as a Girl Scout leader, taking girls and their families to international destinations every summer. I have since expanded my physical travel program. Now I also lead adult only tours with Go Ahead Tours, which is an EF division for adults. And I work with several other organizations. I also offer family friendly tours. And as a certified travel agent, I can also book you on your dream trip or as part of a group or just on your own or as a family. Just reach out to me if you're starting to think about physical travel again and let me know where you want to go. I myself cannot wait to get on an airplane. In terms of our virtual tours, there's a couple of reasons why I started this series, and it was way back in 2020, in April when we started thinking about this. I really wanted to support the tour director community during this time of travel restrictions where they have not been able to work. And I really wanted to keep the excitement of travel alive for our travel group and extend that opportunity to those of you who have learned about us through Facebook, friends, family, social media, and other means. So thank you all for joining us. We've done several tours in the last year since COVID has struck, and all of those tours are available in the recording format on my website, which is girltraveltours.com, and also on my Facebook page, as well as our YouTube channel. We have several more tours coming up and that are scheduled for the months to come. And I'm going to review a few of those with you now. We have a tour that's a little bit different next week, which is called the Royals. We're going to be reviewing the British royalty for you. Then we're going on to Ontario and Quebec. We have the Vatican City. We have a musical tour of Britain, Antarctica, Andalusia, Mexico for Cinco de Mayo, Jerusalem, and Belgium. And we're starting to plan the summer months as well. As long as you're interested in viewing these virtual tours, we will continue to produce them. I have a wonderful group of tour guides and tour directors who I partner with, and they are happy to come back and share a new region with you each week. I know many of you have found our virtual tours on Facebook, and I just wanted to give a shout out to everybody out there. Hello and welcome. But I also want to give a warning. There are still scammers on Facebook who are trying to get people to click through to different sites to give credit cards. And I just want to say, please, please never give a credit card for a free virtual tour. My virtual tour presentations do not require credit cards to join them. You can always safely access our events through my website, which is girltraveltours.com. It's listed on the slide that we have up right now. You can also view them on my Facebook page. Try not to click through on any of the posts that come on the feed that are not my posts, because there's a lot of scammers out there that are trying to take advantage of you. They copy legitimate tours and events, and they copy my name, my email, my phone number, my picture. Just because you think that the photos and the information looks familiar, it doesn't always mean that it is me. And sadly, this is still going on. But we are combating it, and through educating everybody, I think we've really done a good job to change that for most people. Okay, so let's move on to our tour. Before we get going, I want to share with you a few ways that you can interact with us. As I said, we have the Q&A for the people here on Zoom. If you want to pose a question to our tour director, do it there. If you want to chat with me, feel free to do it throughout the event, and I will try to get back to as many people as possible. I also, as you might know, if you've been on more than one tour with us virtually, I love to launch our polls. This gives us a good idea as to what your connection is with Budapest. So what is your connection with Budapest? I've been and I love it. I have a trip booked. I plan to go in the future. I think about adding it to my bucket list, or I am solely interested in experiencing it virtually. Feel free to enter your comments on Facebook or to vote on the poll if you're here on Zoom. So right now, it looks like a little bit more than half of the people have weighed in. I'm going to end this poll so that everybody can see the results. Looks like there's a fair amount of people who have been to Budapest and love it, which is awesome. And I'm sure our tour director will be happy to hear that. And then there's some people that are planning on going in the future. That's me. And then there's also people wanting to add it to their bucket list. And then there's about 15% of you who are solely here to virtually travel, which I appreciate that too. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to stop sharing the poll results. If they still are on your screen, you can click on the button on the top left and just remove that poll from your screen. Today's tour and all of our tours are scheduled for 90 minutes plus a Q&A. I hope that you're ready with a snack or a drink in hand and you're ready to settle in. A tour would not be complete without a fantastic tour director. A tour director is like a personal travel concierge who stays with your group from start to finish and shares a world of knowledge, manages all your travel plans, and makes sure your experience is full of education, stressless, and easy to navigate. These are by far the most important people in a group. And if you're not traveling, these tour directors have not been working. I will share in the chat and the Q&A and on Facebook how you can tip the tour director if you are so inclined. We understand that not everybody can do that. That's fine. If you're able to do it, that's wonderful. This is the way our tour directors are making their money through this COVID lockdown. So we appreciate anybody who's willing to give. I'm hoping that this virtual tour will not only reignite our desire to travel, but also allow a tour director to do what she does best, which is share her knowledge and passion for travel. Today, we're lucky to have a tour director from Hungary who is certified guide in Budapest and is also a tour director for group travel as well. She is super knowledgeable about her country and loves her city, and she can't wait to share her passion with all of you. I am honored to introduce you to and hand over this event to our amazing tour director, Andrea. Andrea, if you're ready, you can take the controls and share your screen and take us to Budapest.
Yes, thank you so much, Mara. Welcome, everybody. And first of all, let me just thank you for this wonderful opportunity to show everyone my beloved hometown, Budapest. And I'm really, really excited to be here. And so I'm just going to share my screen, and then we are going to start the presentation. So let me just ask Mara, is everything okay?
You are good to go, Andrea. I see it fine.
Yes. All right. Yes. So once again, welcome everyone, and it is a wonderful opportunity for me to be here, and I would like to really welcome you to Budapest. My name is Andrea, and I'm a tour guide in Budapest. I was born in Budapest, I grew up in Budapest, and I really was able to see during the last, let's say, couple of decades, how from a little bit of a forgotten capital, it became a really bustling metropolis. So it was actually a wonderful journey to see that change. And I was really, really happy to see that so many of you have been to Budapest, right? So you have been here before. So I really hope that the tour is going to give you some kind of a great, you know, like memories will be coming back to you, and also to those sake that have not been to Budapest. I hope that it will be going on your bucket list in the future. So my kind of plan for the tour presentation is that I would like to just tell you a little bit about, generally about Hungary, about the country, and a little bit about our customs and habits that make Budapest and Hungary so special. And then, of course, after that, we will be touring the city together. So let's start the tour, and I am just really, really excited to welcome all of you here, and I'm really happy to have you virtually today with me here in Budapest. So let's start our tour with just generally talking about what is Hungary famous for, right? What are we famous for? What is Hungary and Budapest famous for? So first of all, there is all the delicious food. I'm going to talk about it a little bit later on. There are breathtaking views and beautiful landscape, and that is actually true not only for Budapest but also for the whole country. Hungary is also famous for the great wines, and we are going to talk about that also a little bit later. And amazing architecture. Budapest is especially very well known for a very special and unique architecture, and of course we are going to talk about that as well. All the ear-catching music that incorporates not only classical music but folk music and gypsy music as well. And then, of course, the stormy history. And my kind of idea of the tour presentation is that I'm going to show you parts of the city that are kind of linked to the different sections of Budapest and the different sites, and that's how I would like to guide through Hungarian history. So first of all, let's just get some of the facts straight. Where is Hungary? Hungary is often considered as an Eastern European or Central European country. Sometimes Hungarian people think about the phrase Eastern European, like as it would have a kind of a negative meaning. I don't think that it is true that way, but some people like to prefer to be called like a Central European country. So you can see Hungary in the heart of Europe, and we have several border countries. We have Slovakia, Ukraine, Romania, Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia, and also Austria. And I put here 10 million inhabitants. We are a little bit less than 10 million, but it is the easiest way to remember is 10 million inhabitants. So it is a relatively small country. And talking about the 10 million inhabitants, it is perhaps interesting to mention that outside of Hungary, there are additional roughly 5 million Hungarian people living, and that is actually mainly due to the very stormy history that we had in the past. Half of that lives in the surrounding neighboring countries, and we have also still today a large population of Hungarian, let's say the descendants of those Hungarians that left Hungary and went to the US and also to Canada. So even today there is an estimated number of about 1.5 million Hungarian people, people with Hungarian background in the US and about 500,000 in Canada. And in the surrounding neighboring countries of Hungary, we have almost everywhere Hungarian minorities living today. And that is due to the fact that after the First World War, Hungary lost lots of territories. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on. Now, when we talk about the Hungarian ethnic composition, I would like to show you this chart, which has the largest figure standing for Hungarian as an ethnic group. And that's over 80%. And the blue part stands for other, so like other ethnic groups. But I would say that I didn't really come across such a chart that would have showed what I think is the real truth, that it's like over 90% Hungarian people living in Hungary, or close to 90%. And the only, let's say, big ethnic group that we have in Hungary is the Hungarian Gypsies. So according to this chart, the Roma population, the Hungarian Gypsies, is like 3.1, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit later on how it is in reality much higher than that. So if we have a look at the map of Hungary, you can see that right in the middle there is the river Danube, and the river Danube cuts the country into two different sections, the eastern and the western section of the country. And also there are the northern territories. So the northern areas are characterized by the fact that we have kind of a hilly area, but we cannot really say in the case of Hungary that there would be high mountains, since we don't have those. It's rather just smaller hills and slopes. And then the eastern part is mainly characterized by the fact that that is where there is the Great Plain area, which is the area where there is the sandy soil, very fertile soil, and that is where the majority of the agricultural activities take place. There are all the different, you know, like animal breeding, and all the fruits and vegetables, and the food basket of Hungary is in that region. And then the western part is mainly characterized by the fact that there is Lake Balaton, which is one of the largest lakes of Europe, and we are lucky to have it as a very, very important holiday destination. And so the Danube River also adds a lot to the fact that Budapest is such a beautiful city, because it cuts the city into different parts, two different parts, Buda and Pest. But otherwise, the Danube River is very, very important. It is the second longest river of Europe, and it goes through altogether 10 countries and 4 capitals. One of those capitals is Budapest. And over the recent years, the river cruise tours and river cruise trips became very, very popular. It's a wonderful way to visit several countries in a relatively short period of time. So talking about these different regions, let me just show you a couple of pictures. So the majority of the land in Hungary would be the kind of forests and hills, really beautiful landscapes you can find all around the country. There are really some nice forests as well, many different regions where you can find these. Also, you can see here the highest point of Hungary, Kékestető, it is called. And again, as I mentioned before, it is not really a high mountain. It is actually just, let me say, a kind of a middle-size hill. And here we can see some of the photos of the Great Plain area. Horse breeding traditions, horse riding tradition had always been very important in Hungary. So here you can actually see, obviously this is not like an ordinary photo that you would come across, but the traditional you know, horse riding skills are showed off here. And you can also see here one of the traditional animals of Hungary. It is called the gray cattle, and it's a kind of cow that Hungarian people brought with them from the Ural mountain range area when they came here more than 1,000 years ago. And so, as I mentioned, this is the area from where the majority of the food is coming in Hungary. And it's really beautiful area, kind of a flat plain area, and the traditions are really preserved there in this part of Hungary. And then also I would like to show you a couple of images of one of my favorite spots in Hungary, Lake Balaton. Lake Balaton is a huge lake. You can see now on this image a very important event that takes place every year. This is the so-called Blue Ribbon sailboat race, and usually 600 sailboats participate in this event. It takes place every year, in the summer. And around the lake, there are some very nice towns and small villages. It's a sweetwater lake, and since we don't have sea, Hungary is a landlocked country, so we kind of refer to it as the Sea of Hungary. It's quite shallow, so it gets warm in the summertime, and so it's really very popular. And you can see the beautiful sunset, for example, on this image. So talking about Hungary, I would like to just bring you a little bit closer to how we really are and talk a little bit about the great Hungarian investors and their investments. So I'm sure everybody is familiar with Rubik's Cube. Rubik's Cube was invented by Ernő Rubik in 1975, and it became an international hit. It was sold all over the world. And it's perhaps interesting to mention that Rubik's Cube was invented because Ernő Rubik wanted to use it as a teaching aid for his students. And then later on, it became an international hit. I don't know how you are keeping up with the records, but right now the world record is just around 5 seconds. And then a couple of other inventions I would like to mention. I mean, of course, there would be much more, but I just wanted to mention a few of them to you. For example, the ballpoint pen, which was invented by László Bíró in 1938, and that really changed the way how we write forever. Or we can also mention vitamin C that was discovered by Albert Szent-Györgyi. And a little bit before this time, the noiseless and non-explosive match, which was invented by János Irényi, and that was also quite an innovative thought in those days. And the first helicopter was also built by a Hungarian man called Oskar Asbóth in 1928. And this line could go on for quite a bit. There were lots of inventors, lots of scientists coming from Hungarian origin. And it's perhaps another topic that I would mention, but it is also in connection with the famous scientist, or we could actually call it an infamous project, the Manhattan Project, where Leo Szilard, Edward Teller, Eugene Wigner, and John von Neumann participated from Hungary. And there are, of course, many stories about this time period, but one of the stories said that when all the scientists were together and some of them left the room, and then Leo Szilard turned to the others and said that, okay, guys, now we can speak in Hungarian. Well, of course, that's not to say that every single scientist was Hungarian there, but there were, just as I mentioned, these the scientists working on these on the Manhattan plan. So also it is perhaps interesting to mention that while we are a small country of only 10 million inhabitants, but in Hungary there are 13 Nobel Prize winners. And that is quite a lot comparing to the population of the country. However, that's a proof of Hungarian stormy history that when they actually got the Nobel Prize, by that time, most of them were not living in Hungary anymore because the stormy history, and I'm going to, of course, speak about that a little bit later on. When it comes to Hungary, we really have to mention music. And the most famous Hungarian composer was Liszt Ferenc, or as the world knows him, Franz Liszt. And he was very, very proud of his Hungarian roots, although he lived most of his life abroad, but he was very often referring to his Hungarian roots through his music. For example, if you think about Hungarian Rhapsody and many other music pieces, during the last 5 years of his life, he lived partly in Vienna and partly in Budapest, and he had founded then the Hungarian Academy of Music. And when it comes to music, I also would like to mention the name of two other composers. One of them is Bela Bartok, who is still today very well known and is famous for his operas, for example, The Miraculous Mandarin or Bluebird Castle. And Zoltán Kodály was not only a composer, but also a music teacher. And his idea was, through his method, which is called the Kodály method, wanted to introduce early age music education. And his idea was that children should learn how to read music before they can actually read and write. And this took place by the help of the so-called absolute solmization, you know, the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And by the help of this, he believed in it that music belongs to everyone, and through music, children can really develop. This method, the Kodály method, is still today used in all the schools in Hungary, and also in many Asian countries, they use the Kodály method, they teach with the Kodály method. And together, with Bela Bartok, they also recorded lots of Hungarian folk songs, went to the little villages, collected the folk songs, and that is why it is due to actually them that we have a lot of these folk songs, folk music in Hungary. And talking about the folk music, we are very proud of our folk traditions, the folk costumes, the folklore dances, and the folk music as well. They have a really long tradition in Hungary. And talking about music, of course, it is not possible without mentioning the gypsy music, right? The gypsy music, the gypsy musicians. For example, on this slide here, you can see a very typical gypsy instrument, gypsy music instrument. It is called the cymbalon. And the cymbalon, it is like a piano. You can see that there are strings, but the strings are hit by this stick, and they have a very, very nice, very interesting and unique sound. And gypsy music was kind of combining into the Hungarian folk music, and it is also kind of incorporated in today's modern music very often. So, for example, I would just like to show you the image of Monika Lakatos here, who actually won a Lifetime Achievement Award at the World Music Expo last year for contribution to gypsy music. And just a little bit, I would like to mention about the gypsy population. So in Hungary, there is a very large number of gypsy population. And this is, I think, a very interesting chart that I found, because it shows the map of Europe, and basically the darker colors show the countries where there is a very large size gypsy population. So here is Hungary, 2%, and then there is Romania and several other countries, Bulgaria, for example, Macedonia. What I find interesting is that on this map, it shows the result of the national census, but on that image on the left up corner, it's the non-official estimation. And so it says, I mean, there that the darker colors would have between 7–10%. So in the case of Hungary, that would mean an estimated number between 700,000 and 1 million gypsies. And so in Hungary, the gypsy musicians and the gypsy dancers, and also the gypsy folklore is a very important part of Hungarian cultural heritage. And talking about the folk traditions, I just wanted to show you the very typical Hungarian folk motifs, folklore motifs, even though we are a relatively small country, but it is different in the different regions of the country, how they are making the embroidery. And there are some beautiful examples, lots of flower motifs, lots of motifs that are taken from nature. And talking about it, it is very important that still today we are really trying very hard to preserve all of this heritage. And then talking about the Hungarian heritage, I also would like to mention to you Herend porcelain. Perhaps some of you have heard about it. It's actually the most famous handmade porcelain, and it has a very long kind of an ongoing tradition. On this photo, you can actually see the most famous pattern, the so-called Victoria pattern, that was named this way with the flowers and the butterflies, following the time when Queen Victoria, Queen of England, had ordered an entire set of this porcelain after the London World Exhibition in 1851. And also talking about Hungarians and connecting to that part when I mentioned to you that there had been times in Hungarian history when lots of people left the country. So traditionally, second half of 19th century, first few decades of the 20th century, and perhaps it is some kind of a new information for you, but there were lots of Hungarian immigrants working in Hollywood. And for example, the two very famous filming companies, so Paramount Pictures and Fox Pictures, which is today's 20th Century Fox, they were both founded by Hungarian immigrants, right? So Adolf Cukor and William Fox founded these filming companies. And there had been also other actors and actresses, for example, Béla Lugosi or Zsa Gabor. I mean, we may not bring her name up just for the acting skills, but for other reasons. There is also Houdini. Of course, he was not an actor, but he also got a star on the Walk of Fame. And we can also mention the name of Tony Curtis, for example, or Johnny Weissmuller. There were so many of these Hungarian immigrants trying to get a part in a film after a while that in a Hollywood film studio, they actually put up a sign on the wall that said that it's not enough if you are Hungarian, but you have to be talented as well, right? And so that was kind of a way to try to scare away those Hungarians that went there and wanted a part in a new film. So also talking about Budapest, it couldn't be complete without mentioning that very wonderful spa culture and spa tradition that we have here. Here we have Széchenyi Spa, which is on the Pest side in the city park, and it is one of the most popular hot water spa of Budapest. And it is not only for the locals though, but the advantage of the locals is that it is partly covered by the National Health Care. So you can actually get even the medical treatments, the medical massage almost for free, and you can have a very low price and you can go there on a regular basis. But of course it is open for the visitors, and you would be more than welcome to join in the fun. As we say, this is Széchenyi Spa from the outside. And there are several spas, and usually local people go to the one which is in their neighborhood. But here there is Gellért Spa, which is on the Buda side. It has the huge outdoor pool, also several indoor pools. And the interior of Gellért Spa is a very good example of the beautiful Art Nouveau architecture that we also have here in Budapest. In the spa, there are lots of beautiful decorational elements that were made not by Herend porcelain manufacturer, but by one of their big competitor, Zsolnai porcelain manufacturer. And so it's a beautiful kind of a tile, a ceramic tile, and all over the spa you can see this kind of decoration. You can see the indoor pool from Gellért Spa. And again, when I would like to make you familiar with the way how Hungarians live here in Budapest, I would really like to mention about the coffee house culture that we have here in Budapest. We have lots of coffee houses. The kind of habit of drinking coffee goes back all the way to the Turkish time period when Hungary was under Ottoman rule, and Turkish coffee was introduced to the Hungarians, but they had no idea what that was, so they refused to drink it. And they also refer to it as the black soup. That was a kind of an expression that we actually still use today. So when we say, here comes the black soup, it means that you are in for an unpleasant surprise. And among the first coffee houses of Europe, we can find coffee houses opened in Hungary as early as the 16th century. And by the time of the 19th century, there had been 500 coffee houses in Budapest. This is Rusfrom Café, which is one of the oldest ones that is still in operation today, dating back to 1827. And here comes not the oldest one, but definitely the most beautiful one, New York Café, which was opened by the famous American life insurance company, New York Life. And they built up this beautiful coffee house on the ground floor of their office building. They wanted to impress the rich clients, and they wanted to really convince them that they have the money so that they can trust them. And the kind of funny outcome was that, of course, lots of wealthy people used to go there, but also it became the meeting point of the Hungarian intellectual. A lot of the very poor, very broken artists and writers used to hang around there. And so it became also some kind of a meeting point. It was awarded the most beautiful coffee house of the world a couple of years ago. And there is something else that I definitely wanted to mention to you, because it is actually quite again, let's say an infamous title that we have, and that is that Hungary is the country that had the highest inflation ever, and also we had the highest denomination of any banknote that was ever issued. So you can see here 1,000 trillion tenge, which would be 10 to the 21st power, right, after the number one. And so this was the highest denomination ever. In 1946, that was when this took place in Hungary. And perhaps it is interesting if I just mention to you a personal connection to it. I have actually these framed banknotes in my house, and I got all of these from my grandmother. So these are all original from this time period. And she had quite a lot of these left, and I just really treasure these because it kind of takes us back to this very interesting part of Hungarian history. So at that time, the official currency was the penge, and after this very high inflation, they switched to the currency that we have today. And so this is the official Hungarian currency called the Hungarian forint, and the abbreviation for it is HUF. And you can see some of the exchange rates, Canadian dollar, US dollar, and the euro. And it's actually a type of currency, the actual banknotes. We like it very much. It's, of course, with all the great historical figures of Hungarian history. And although we are a European Union country, we are not in the Eurozone, which means that we don't have the euro as the official currency. Another, I think, very fascinating subject that I would like to tell you a little bit about is the Hungarian language. If you have a look at this language family tree, you can see that there is a kind of a common root for all the Indo-European languages, and then Indo-European languages break into two direction. And then there are the Slavic languages, for example, Russian and Polish. There are the Latin languages, so Spanish, Italian, and then there are the Anglo-Saxon languages like English and German, right? But all of them have the common root of Indo-European languages. Hungarian, you cannot discover anywhere there. So here is Hungarian. It is coming out of a completely different root, and this is the so-called Uralic languages, or Finno-Ugrian languages. And there are two little patches that stand for two other languages that are even today spoken in Europe, and they are Finnish and Estonian, right? And so apparently these languages have something in common, but believe me, I'm a native Hungarian speaker. I don't understand a single word of Finnish or Estonian. Presumably, the reason for the similar root is the fact that Hungarians, Finnish, and Estonian tribes all used to live in the Ural mountain range a long, long time ago. So just to feel sympathy for Hungarian kids, have a look at our alphabet. We have 44 letters, and in the Hungarian alphabet, we have lots of letters that have different lines and dots on the top of the letters, and we also have double letters, like if you have a look at N and Y, or S and Z, or T and Y, and so they form a separate sound. The best way for you to understand this, if you want to pronounce correctly the name of our capital, you should never say Budapest, but you should always say Budapest. And that is because S and Z would give an S sound in Hungarian, but a single S is an esh, right? So that's why the correct way to pronounce is Budapest. And here comes just a kind of a funny representation of how Hungarian language is so unrelated to other languages. You can see the list of how we say in all different languages the word camera, right? Camera, it's all very, very similar, but then in Hungarian, it's fényképezőgép. So that's how you say it in Hungarian. And then there is also another part where we talk about potato. It's also very similar in several other languages, but then in Hungarian, here down below, you see that if we say it in a formal word, with a formal word, it would be burgonya, informal word would be krumpli, and traditional folk expression would be kolompár. So it is really, really very different. And then the Hungarian flag has the symbolic colors. It's three stripes, red, white, and green. Red meaning and symbolizing strength, white, faithfulness, and green standing for hope. Now, also there is a perhaps interesting kind of a custom that we are doing in Hungary, and that is that we each have our name day. So it's not only the birthdays that we celebrate, but also our name day. And so here we are in lovely Budapest, and Budapest is very often referred to as the city of wonderful views. The city is divided into two parts. There is the hilly Buda side and the flat Pest side. And the Pest side is much bigger now than the Buda side, but originally the Buda side was the capital practically for hundreds of years. And if you look down from like one of the highest point, Gellért Hill, you can see practically this view, the flat Pest side with really kind of spreading out, and then the hills of the Buda side with the castle district, the old town on the top of the hill. You can see also the bridges over there, two of the bridges. And from all different sections of the city, there are really wonderful views to the other side, and also to the river Danube. Here you can see it from another viewpoint. So the two parts of the city were actually united in 1873. Up until that part, the name of the Hungarian capital was not Budapest, but it was only Buda. So this is the Buda side, the hilly side. This is the Pest side, the flat side. And in the far distance, there is the district called Óbuda, which used to be a very old section. And so here you can see also how the districts are allocated in the city. There are almost 2 million inhabitants in Budapest. It's a little bit less, but for the easier reason, I have put 2 million, and it is divided into 23 districts. As you can see, the Buda side has much less districts than the Pest side. And you can also see here on this map the interesting kind of plan that was used to build up the Pest side in the second half of the 19th century. They decided to build up these two huge semicircular shaped boulevards that started and ended at the river side. There is also another one parallel with it, which is smaller. And then also they built up the straight line avenues that always start at the river and go out to the suburban areas. And this was a kind of a spider net structure that was so popular in those days. In many countries, they couldn't really do it, in many cities, because the city was in the way practically. But here they could do it in an almost perfect way. Because the Pest side was really built up at that time in the second half of the 19th century. And also in 1838, there used to be a big flood, and a lot of the original buildings were destroyed at that time. So now let's go back a little bit, long time before the Hungarians even came here. And I would like to just show you this old map that actually shows the Roman settlement that used to be here in today's territories of Budapest. So on the northern part of the Buda side, in today's district of Óbuda, there used to be a huge Roman settlement. Some 50,000 inhabitants used to live there. There was the large civilian town and the military town. 5,000 Roman soldiers used to protect that area. And today, still, we have actually ruins. There is a big excavation area from the Roman times, and there is still today 2 amphitheaters, the ruins of 2 amphitheaters in this part of Budapest. And perhaps it's interesting to mention, here is the amphitheater, that of course the Hungarians and the Romans had never met, because Hungarians arrived 500 years after the Romans. But we still use the name for this district. We still use the name Aquincum. And it was also a place where they had all the Roman spas, all the Roman bathhouses, and the famous aqueduct system as well. And as I mentioned, Hungarian people arrived here 500 years after the Romans. So in the 9th century, Hungarian people arrived here from the original mountain range of the Ural mountain range. I mean, this is a topic about which Hungarians can argue day and night. How did it happen? Why did it happen? Where did the Hungarians really come from? There are lots of ideas which suggest that Hungarians came even from further Asia. What we do know is that the Ural mountain range was definitely a part from where they came from, and they migrated towards the center parts of Europe, and then eventually they arrived to modern day territories of Hungary. At that time, it was not an organized nation. There was the kind of a loose alliance of the 7 tribes. And you can see on this representation when the leaders of the 7 tribes each cut their veins and they poured out the blood to this bowl, and that was the so-called blood contract. And by that, they had taken an oath to each other. They will help each other, and they will protect each other. And so they arrived here in 896, and that is what we consider the conquest of Hungary. In reality, I have to tell you that it wasn't a real conquest, because at that time, nobody lived here, right? I mean, some scattered tribes were here, but there wasn't an organized nation that would have protected this land. And Arpad was the most important tribe leader, and later on, during 400 years, his descendants became the tribe leaders and then later the kings of Hungary. And so, talking about this, I would like to show you one of the most iconic places of the city. This is Hero Square, and on Hero Square, you can come across like a history book. The Hungarian historical figures are represented there, and surrounding the column, there are the 7 equestrian statues of these 7 chief leaders, and further behind there are the statues of the famous kings and leaders of Hungary. Hero Square was erected for the 1000th years anniversary celebration that was held in 1896. And for that event, even behind Hero Square in the city park, they had built up hundreds of exhibition halls to show the Hungarian culture. And also we can say that half of the city was built up for that occasion. Here you can see a closer image of Arpad and all the other tribe leaders of the 7 Hungarian tribes. As you can see, they are depicted on horseback. They were excellent horsemen, and horse riding traditions were already very, very important at that time. So here you can see just again a little bit of a close-up of how this semicircular shaped colonnade embraces the square on Hero Square. And if you go to Hero Square, you can really learn a lot about Hungarian history. And also for this big celebration, the 1000th years anniversary celebration, they built up 2 museums. One of them is the Museum of Fine Arts. It was not completely ready for the World Exhibition, but later on it was completed, and it is one of the best art museums of Budapest today. It has mainly actually foreign art, not so much Hungarian art, but it's a wonderful collection of Spanish collection, Dutch collection, French collection, and just recently the museum was beautifully renovated. So just for the sake of seeing the building already is worthwhile to visit. And then this is how City Park looks behind Hero Square. It's a huge outdoor space and park. It was among the first public parks of Europe before it was a hunting resort of the Habsburg family. And as I mentioned, for the for this exhibition, for the Millennium exhibition, lots of things were built up, and today this is still a kind of a favorite getaway place for the local people. You can actually see here the shape of Hero Square, and behind there is an artificial pond, and then all the different institutions. There is also Széchenyi Spa can be found here, and also Vajdahunyad Castle as well, and lots of beautiful park area. This is actually an image of how it looked at the time of the Millennium exhibition. This is Vajdahunyad Castle, which is a very interesting example of the way of thinking in those days. Vajdahunyad Castle consists of altogether 4 buildings, and each 4 buildings were copies of other buildings that used to stand in other parts of Hungary. Vajdahunyad Castle itself used to stand and still is standing in Transylvania, which is now in Romania, but it was part of Hungary until the end of the First World War. And then here you can see, for example, this beautiful building. It's the Elephant House from the Zoo of Budapest that was built up in the middle of the 19th century as the second zoo in Europe. And also a modern playground in the city park area that you can find there. And talking about the 7 tribes, I would like to show you another part of the city. This is the Buda side. This is the so-called Fisherman's Bastion. And us Hungarians have a little bit of an obsession with showing numbers all the time, right? We like to represent the different numbers. Maybe that's why we had all those scientists in the past. And so Fisherman's Bastion is a beautiful lookout terrace from where you can enjoy the view of the other side. And it has altogether 7 towers. And if you have a look at these towers that you can see right now, they have this kind of special shape that is a referral to how originally the tents of the Hungarian nomadic people used to look, right? It has the shape of the tents. It is called the Fisherman's Bastion because this area was protected by the Fishermen's Guild, and also because of the reason that it was built above the former fisherman's village, and so that is why it is called the Fisherman's Bastion. You can see it has a real kind of a romantic look to it, different kind of a nice decoration, really one of the best viewpoint in the city. And of course, you can see here the kind of original features of the tribes, the Hungarian tribes. And it's perhaps interesting to realize that time travel is possible. Have a look at the actor Woody Harrelson. If you compare him to one of the Hungarian tribe leaders, quite similar. Who knows? Who knows? So jumping back in history, we are back to the 10th century. And so practically when the Hungarian people came here, some people settled down, but many others went out on raids. And in those days, Hungarians were very much feared all around Europe. And in many countries, they used to say that from the arrows of Hungarians, please God save us. They were very vicious, very violent people. They used to attack people, and practically they returned with the stolen treasures. So that was basically the aim of all these raids at that time period. And then there was a huge kind of a turning point in our history, the year 1000. It's quite convenient because it's very easy to remember. So in the year 1000, the first king of Hungary, Stephen I, or Saint Stephen, decided to stop the raids, stop the tribal lifestyle, and he had established the Hungarian kingdom, and he himself was Christian and took up Roman Catholic religion. He also converted the people into Christian religion, although it doesn't, it wasn't so easy as it sounds right now. It didn't happen overnight, but it was basically due to him that Hungary became a Christian kingdom. You can see the representation of St. Stephen on Hero Square and also in front of Matthias Church up in the Castle District. I mean, he must be everywhere, all over the place. He is really considered as the founding father of Hungary. So here you can see St. Stephen's Basilica, which is on the Pest side, and it is the largest Roman Catholic church of Budapest. It's a very beautiful building. When we step inside, we can marvel at the 50 different shades of beautiful Italian marble that was used to decorate the building. What makes it very unique is that there is a very high focus on St. Stephen in the church. For example, what is more than surprising is that on the main altar, the big white statue is the statue of St. Stephen. We call him St. Stephen because he was canonized a couple of decades after his death in the 11th century. And that is why we refer to him as Saint Stephen. And on the other image, you can actually see a moment which is very often depicted in Hungarian churches, and that is the moment when Saint Stephen is offering the crown to the Virgin Mary, offering the Holy Crown to the Virgin Mary, and is asking the Virgin Mary to be the patron of Hungarians. And in the church, there is something that you can come across, and that is the mummificated holy right hand of St. Stephen, which is considered as one of the most important relics in Hungarian Catholic Church. And it is surprisingly in a good condition, given the fact that it's going to be 1,000 years old in a few years' time. It was preserved very well, and under normal circumstances, it is kept in the church. But during a procession, which always takes place on the 20th of August, which is the day of St. Stephen, it is carried around on the streets of the city. And of course, it is still done nowadays, not just on that image that I had showed you. And so talking about religions, I would just like to show you this chart, which shows the composition, I mean, the different religions in Hungary. And this chart is also a little bit interesting, similar to what I had showed you in connection with the Roma population, because the red color stands for Roman Catholic religion, and it only says 37.1%. And there is a large percentage, 45.9%, which stands for other. And I have to tell you something which is, I think, is a little bit interesting. Every 5 years we have a national census in Hungary, and the only one question to which you don't have to answer is, what is your religion? This is not something that Hungarians would be kind of openly discuss. I mean, maybe it's changing now, but that was how it was in the past. Perhaps it has to do with the fact that during communism, it was definitely not something that you wanted to discuss. However, on the other hand, I really have to add that in Hungary, it was possible to practice religions during even the communist time. Churches were generally open, they were functioning. So I would really say that out of that blue category, the other category, lots of people actually practice Roman Catholic religion. So I would say that the real percentage would be closer to like 70%. And then of course there is Reformed and Lutheran and all sorts of other religions, and we have about 1% Jewish, and we are going to talk about that a little bit later on. Again, we are jumping back on the course of history. We are back in the 13th century when a Mongolian invasion took place. So with the leadership of Batu Khan, the Mongolians swept through the country. It was a real devastation. And at that time, the Hungarian people had to learn something, and that kind of lesson was that you must have castles and fortresses if you want protection, right? Because without those, they were like defenseless. And that was the time when all over the country, they started to build up heavy castles and fortresses. And also that was the time when the capital was newly set up in Buda. So on the Buda side, up on the hillside, and as you can see on this map, on the top of the hill, they set up a new kind of a capital. It was walled around, it had a double wall system. Still today, we have parts of this double wall system. And you can see that about 1/3 of this area today is taken up by the Royal Palace. Then there are 2 office buildings. I'm going to show you those. And then the rest of the area is the former civilian town. And that is where there are the Fisherman's Bastion and Matthias Church. So in the civilian town, during the Middle Ages, that was the place where it was really like a kind of a melting pot, and different people used to live there together. Hungarian people, Germans, Slavs, also a Jewish community. And so the castle district today is considered as the old town, the oldest part of Budapest. So it is possible, of course, to walk up there, but it's a charming way to get up there is by the funicular, by the cable car. Once you are up there, you can enjoy this beautiful panoramic view of the other side and the river and the chain bridge as well. And as I mentioned, up there is this huge complex of the Royal Palace. Now, we kind of proudly say that this is the Royal Palace, but in reality, it wasn't really used by any royalty, because ever since it was built up, late 17th, early 18th century, Hungary was part of the Habsburg Empire. So the emperors and the empresses always used to live in Vienna and never here. So practically it was not really used most of the time. And today inside the Royal Palace, there are 3 very important cultural institutions. National Library, the History Museum, and also the Hungarian National Gallery. Here you can see the entrance of the National Gallery, and that is the museum that I would recommend to all of you that are interested in Hungarian art, because that is really the best museum. You can also see this nice big statue of a turul bird, which is the legendary bird of the Hungarian tribes. And you can see the palace from another angle. This actually belongs to the National Gallery. And you can just kind of see it from like a bird's eye view. So you can kind of imagine the area I'm talking about. It is really like on the top of the hill with this huge complex of the former royal palace. And then here comes one of the two office buildings. This is the office of the President of Hungary. No offense to the president, but Hungarian president has more just like representative functions. The real political power is not in his hands, but it is in the hand of the prime minister. And the prime minister's office, you can see here only just part of it, otherwise it's a much bigger building. And so meanwhile, the president is elected by the parliament. The prime minister is actually coming from that party that wins at the national elections that we have in every 4 years. And as we go further on in the castle district, you end up in this area of really a charming area with all the colorful houses, narrow streets, and little hidden courtyards, and everywhere with the cobblestone streets. And this way you really can feel that you are stepping back a little bit in time. So practically we can say that the history of this area goes back to the 13th century. We have only just parts and remains from the 13th, 14th, 15th century buildings. For example, these arches can be found very often on the ground floors of the buildings, but it is due to the fact that Hungary was under Ottoman rule, and during the Turkish occupation, a lot of the original buildings in this area were badly damaged. So you can see also some of the very beautifully decorated buildings. So often you can come across it that there are the arches from 13th, 14th century on the ground floor, and then the upper floors are from 17th, 18th century, and the top floor often are from the 20th century because of the very bad damage of the Second World War. Here you can see the statue of Pallas Athena, the Greek goddess, and also she was the protector of the cities. And you can also see these images that show you how this area looked after the war. I mean, it's not even the worst time period right after the war, but a little bit later. And this is the castle district area. And once again, we are going back a little bit in history to the time period of the 15th century. And I would like to just mention a few words to you about King Matthias, who besides St. Stephen is considered as another great Hungarian king. He was also considered as the Renaissance ruler because due to the fact that he was married to an Italian lady, Renaissance idea and art and culture spread in Hungary at a very rapid space, and King Matthias had established a beautiful Renaissance court. And still today we have pieces of that wonderful library, the so-called corvinas that he had. And as you can see on the right corner, there is the coat of arms of King Matthias with a raven, and this raven appears in all sorts of different places. It is based on several legends in connection with King Matthias. You can see that the raven is holding a ring in his beak. Apparently, one of the legends said that one day this black raven stole the ring from King Matthias, and then eventually they had to chase him down to get the ring back. But there are all sorts of different versions of this legend in connection with the black raven. So perhaps you recognize where we are. We are at the Fisherman's Bastion, and we have also the statue of Stephen I and Stephen over there. And then here is this beautiful church, Matthias Church, which is also called Coronation Church because several Hungarian kings were crowned in the church. And also it is called the Church of Our Lady, but most commonly we call it Matthias Church because that was the church where King Matthias had both of his weddings. You can see that it has a very beautiful rooftop. It was made in the Zsolnai porcelain manufacturer, the same manufacturer that did the interior decorations for Keller Spa. And once again, you can see an image of the black raven. And the church had a very long history. Already in the 13th century, on the very same spot a church used to stand. It was going through lots of renovation, restoration. During the Turkish times, it was converted into a Turkish mosque. And the present day way how it looks dates back to the late 19th century. In those days, it was very customary, very popular to turn back to the old architectural style. So it was given a beautiful neo-Gothic exterior. When we step inside, it's a very interesting mixture of showing beautiful interior wall painting. It's all wall painting inside, incorporating Turkish design, Renaissance pattern, so from all the highlights of the church. And also there is a lot of referral to King Matthias. For example, here you can see the coat of arms of the family of King Matthias. And also you can see an important moment of Hungarian history when Hungarians had a victory over the Ottomans in the 15th century. And so it shows the very moment when Christianity won over the Islam. I mentioned this in particular because it's very important to mention about Hungarian history that unfortunately we were always very much rebellious. We always wanted to fight for our freedom. However, Hungarian people usually lost all the wars they entered into. We always managed to end up on the wrong side. So unfortunately, we don't have an awful lot of wonderful victory that we would have had in our history. So the ones that we actually have, we are very proud of. And so after this victory that I mentioned to you, there was peace for some time, but then eventually in the middle of the 16th century, Hungary fell under Turkish rule and Buda became the headquarters of the Turkish forces. And of course, the appearance changed very much because churches were converted into mosques. And it is, I think, also interesting to mention that even today in Hungary, we can still come across these, even though these two examples are not in Budapest, but in Hungary, in other towns. So you can see an original mosque and also an original minaret from the Turkish time period. Also in Budapest, we do have remains from the Turkish times. For example, the pilgrimage place for Turkish people, the Tomb of Gul Baba. You can see his statue there. He was a Turkish religious person, a so-called dervish. And it has been recently beautifully renovated. And it is really a very nice way how it is preserved still today in Budapest. And we also have Turkish spas, and they are very much incorporated in the spa culture, in the bath culture, and often, meanwhile preserving the original features, they have also some modern additions as well. So once again, we are continuing with the history. So at the end of the 17th century, finally, Hungary was freed from the Turks, from the Ottomans. This was practically carried out by the United Army that was established by the Habsburgs. And so afterwards, Hungary became part of the Habsburg Empire. And so this was a very long time period during which Hungary was part of the Habsburg Empire. All the way it lasted until the end of the First World War. However, I really have to emphasize one thing, and that was that during the, let's say, first half of this time period, Hungary was down at the provincial level of just a kind of a territory within the big Habsburg Empire without any real rights. So it was definitely considered as an oppression. So the Habsburg family ruled half of Europe for 600 years. From the end of the 17th century, we had this common history with them. But obviously, Hungarians did not want to kind of to be settled for this kind of oppression. So we had two War of Independencies. The first one at the beginning of the 18th century, it was led by Ferenc Rákóczi. You can see his equestrian statue in front of the Parliament building. And also we had another War of Independence led by Lajos Kossuth, and this memorial is also in front of the Parliament building. So this War of Independence was also not successful, unfortunately, as I had mentioned before. So in fact, a lot of the Hungarian national celebrations are not really celebrations, but commemorating the desperate freedom fights. So just this I wanted to show you because Chain Bridge, the very first permanent stone bridge of the capital, was built up just at the time when the War of Independence was crashed. So it was finished at that time. And it was very, very important because it really added a lot to that the two parts could kind of grow together. And we must mention at this point the name of István Széchenyi, who was considered as the greatest Hungarian because he had done so many things for the development of Hungary and Budapest. So that is why the official name of Chain Bridge is Széchenyi Chain Bridge. And you can see an image of how it looks nowadays. And you can see also from another point of view. So going back to that time period that I had mentioned, in 1867, a very important turning point took place, and that was the so-called compromise, the signing of a peace treaty. And that peace treaty established the Austro-Hungarian Monarchy, right? So up until that time, it was called the Habsburg Empire, no mentioning about Hungary. Austro-Hungarian Monarchy was a different story. Hungary had gained lots of importance and lots of freedoms and privileges, so to say. So on one side, on one hand, we had enjoyed to be part of this huge empire, but on the other hand, we had a great deal of sovereignty and independence as well. And so we really can say that between 1867 and the First World War, there was the golden age, the most flourishing time period of Hungarian history. It started out with the coronation of Emperor Franz Joseph, the emperor of the Habsburg Empire, who at the same time, of course, became the King of Hungary, and he agreed to have a coronation to be the King of Hungary in Matthias Church. So he was crowned there together with his wife, Queen Elizabeth, Sisi. Sisi was very much loved by Hungarian people because many people thought that it was really her behind, kind of pulling the strings to influence her husband, the emperor, to sign the peace treaty that really brought this golden age to Hungary and Budapest. So at that time, a huge scale development started out in Budapest. They started to build up all the bridges, Liberty Bridge, and then here Elizabeth Bridge, which was otherwise named after Queen Elizabeth, Sisi, the wife of Emperor Franz Joseph. And this is how it looks today. You can see that Elizabeth Bridge, the white bridge, looks very different from the other image that I showed you. And that is because Elizabeth Bridge was the only bridge in the city that after the bad damage of the Second World War wasn't restored according to the original way, but it was newly rebuilt in 1964. So it does have a little bit of a character of the 60s. this is the way how they would look today. Elizabeth Bridge, the white color bridge, and then behind the green color bridge, it's Liberty Bridge. And it was not only the time for building up the bridges, not only to build up that kind of modern arrangement of boulevards and avenues on the Pest side, but they were also introducing the public transportation. So in 1887, the very first tram line started the operation, and still today this line, tram number 4 and number 6, is the busiest tram line of Europe. 200,000 passengers get on this tram line every single day. And then we also have several other lines, but number 2 tram would be the most scenic tram line. Almost entirely it runs on the river side by the Danube, and so it offers beautiful views of the city. And then there is another public transportation type for which we are very proud even today, and that's the underground. We don't call it metro. The modern metro lines we have, we call it metros, but this is the underground line. And so it was built up for the celebration, the Millennium celebration in 1896. And in those days, there was only one other city that had an underground, and that was the London Underground. So it was quite a big deal that an underground line was built up, and the purpose of it was to connect the city center with the city park area. And this is how it would look today. This is the stop for Hero Square. You can see the Hungarian inscription there. It really has this kind of cute look, and it's very close to the surface. You can see that the light is coming in from the surface, because there are only a couple of steps as you go down to the underground. And here, for example, you can see the stop of the Opera House. The name of the stop is the Opera. And talking about the public transportation, I would just like to mention that even today we have an excellent public transportation in Budapest, with the extensive system of the trams, the underground, the metro lines, the buses. And so it's really, really convenient to use that if you visit Budapest. And then here you can see that beautiful avenue where the underground is. So it's under Andrashi Avenue. This avenue was also built up for this Millennium exhibition. It really connects the city center with the city park. And it was designed according to the plans of the Champs-Élysées in Paris. So at the beginning, closer to the river side, it is like a very elegant avenue with all the shops and restaurants and cafes and the opera house, the theater district. And the more you get out from the city center, the more you get closer to Hero Square and the city park. It's like more green areas, garden areas, and it's like a villa quarter. And talking about this period, the Golden Age, I really would like to mention to you one of my favorite buildings, the Hungarian Houses of Parliament. If I would say that I would have to pick like one building to really describe this Golden Age, I would really go for the Parliament building. With the Parliament building, Hungarians wanted to show off what a beautiful building they are capable of building. They didn't care about how much it costs. They didn't care about how big it is. They just went along and built up this magnificent building. This is the main facade. This is what you would see from the river or from the Buda side. And you can really tell that it was built up as a really symmetrical building, because at that time we used to have a bicameral parliament. It was like a British type parliament. And so there was the upper house, the lower house, the House of Lords, and the House of Commons. And as you can see, there is a big dome in the middle. So if they had something to do together, then they met in the Dome Hall. You can see it from another angle, from the square where it stands. It's hard to take the whole building because it's so big. It doesn't fit into like one image. Only if you just kind of have it from above, but even then just one of the wings can be seen. So it's also a very good example to describe the kind of eclectic style architecture that was so much around in the 19th century. And it's a very typical neo-Gothic building with all the pointing towers, but then right in the middle, there is a perfect neo-Renaissance dome. So that is how we describe eclectic style here in Budapest. And it was very much present in the architectural styles in those days in the 19th century. Inside, in addition, there are also neo-Baroque elements and very, very rich decoration of golden leaves, marble surfaces, handmade carpets, stained glass windows, painting, statues, it's all there. By the way, it's also kind of interesting to mention, and it gives you a description of this golden age era, that it's the third largest parliament building of the world after Buenos Aires in Argentina and after the largest one in Bucharest in Romania. So basically, it was interesting how the Hungarians really wanted to show off all that skill and knowledge that they had when they were building up the parliament, and they wanted to take advantage of the freedom and liberty that they had, and finally they were able to have their very own parliament building. It's practically a 4-story building with almost 700 rooms inside. So still today, it's a functioning parliament. The parliamentary sessions are held inside the parliament. There is also a public library. It's also possible to visit the parliament building. And this is actually the session hall of the parliament building. And another kind of a cute feature I would like to show you is the numbered cigar holders. So these golden holders are the cigar holders, and they were supposed to be the place for the cigars. So if somebody was smoking a cigar, they just put it down here, and they only had to memorize the number. So then at the end, they didn't finish off somebody else's cigar, which was also handy. And of course, another very important addition to the parliament building is the fact that we have there the Holy Crown of Hungary and also the crown jewels of Hungary. And we refer to it as St. Stephen's crown, although we do know that especially the crown jewels were from later time period, and only just the lower part of the crown could have been used by St. Stephen, but later on all the Hungarian kings were crowned by this crown. So whomever had the crown had the power over the country. So therefore, during the course of history, very often people were after the crown and they were stolen, or I mean the crown jewels and the crown, they were stolen or hidden or buried under the ground. Towards the end of the Second World War, the crown jewels and the Holy Crown were given to US soldiers for safekeeping purposes. Hungarian government was afraid that they would be stolen. And so afterwards, because of all the stormy course of history, because of communism, the Cold War and all that stuff, they practically were stored in Fort Knox until 1978. And in 1978, Jimmy Carter, US president, decided to return them to Hungary. And they had one condition, and that one condition was that the crown should not be given back to the political leadership, the communist leaders, but to the Hungarian public in general. So when the plane landed with the crown jewels on board, there was a kind of a delegation, but there was no member of the communist leadership there at that moment. And so we have these coronation jewels and the Holy Crown in the Parliament building. If you think about Hungarian history, from the year 1000 until 1945, officially we had been a kingdom, so that's why they are just so important. And coming back a little bit to history, this map shows the time period of the Austro-Hungarian Monarchy. The green color stands for the ethnic Hungarians. So you can see what an important role Hungary had in those days in the Austro-Hungarian monarchy time period. So unfortunately, this golden age ended with the First World War, and you can see these images in Budapest right outside an excellent museum on the First World War. So unfortunately, Hungary entered the First World War on the side of Germany, and obviously Hungary lost the war. One of the most important results of that was how Hungary was dealt with in the peace treaty that closed down the First World War. And I would like to just show you this map of Hungary, how it looked before the First World War, the big blue map of Hungary, and the much smaller gray map is present-day territories of Hungary. So due to the Treaty of Trianon, which was signed in 1920 in France, it was decided that let's say the punishment for Hungary would be the territorial loss. So Hungary lost 2/3 of its former territory, which included also 50% of the population. So imagine one day these people woke up to be living in another country, right? So territories were given, and I'm saying how the countries were called back then, so Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, and also Romania. The largest territory, Transylvania, was given to Romania. And it's perhaps also interesting to mention that those people that became the citizens of other countries really strongly preserved the national identity, the culture. I mean, it happened now more than 100 years ago, yet they did not assimilate, but they still live in these countries and Hungarian minorities. And most importantly, they preserve not only the heritage, the culture, but also the Hungarian language as well. And I would like to show you these two kind of interesting flyers that I found. On the kind of black and white one, you can see how the US would have looked with the same territorial losses. So you can see the black parts. So you can imagine that that would have been the case if the same percentage of territories would have been given away in the case of the US. And on the other side, the colorful ones are, of course, also showing Hungary. And then there is the same kind of image showing France, and then Great Britain, or, for example, Italy. Then once again, there is the US. And then also there is Germany, like with this central patch, which only remained, I mean, in case of that territorial losses. So, of course, Hungarian people thought that it was a very unfair treaty, but of course we know now from history that even though Hungarians felt that it was very, very unfair, but also many other countries were not happy with the way how the First World War ended. So it really set the ground for the Second World War. So here you can see Admiral Miklós Horthy, who was the governor of Hungary, and who actually took Hungary into the Second World War. So Hungary entered the Second World War on the side of Germany again. And I'm not saying that it was the only reason, but it was one of the important, important reason that Hungary entered, because it was promised that all these lost territories would be recovered. Of course, there is no reason for me to mention that this was not the way how it happened. And of course, during the tour, I don't have the time to really go into details about what happened during the Second World War, but I would like to show you a couple of the images of how Budapest looked after the siege of the city. So Budapest was under siege for almost 2 months, but actually more than 2 months, and it was bombed by the German forces, by the Soviet forces, also by the Allied forces. It was one of the European capitals that was damaged the worst possible way. And so it is really, by looking at these images, it is really kind of hard to imagine. Hard to imagine the conditions in those days. You can see how all the bridges were destroyed. You can see that practically Elizabeth Bridge disappeared. So that was why they had to build up a completely new bridge later on. And eventually then it shows how Budapest and Hungary was liberated by the Soviet troops. Even nowadays, even though so many decades had been passed ever since the end of the Second World War, we still have remains. So we still have bullet holes in some of the buildings. Although I really must mention that in the last 30 years, an incredible renovation took place. And talking about the different sections, different areas of Budapest, I would like to take you over to another district of the city, and that's the Jewish Quarter, and to mention to you a few words about the Jewish population. To talk about Hungarian history, it would be not complete without the Hungarian Jews. In Hungary, there had been a very large size Jewish population, and that was mainly due to immigration from different countries. By the time of the late 19th century, there was such a large size Jewish population in Hungary that, for example, in the capital, 1/4 of the population of Budapest was from Jewish origin. At that time, there was a population of 1 million inhabitants, half of what we would have now. So there were about 240,000 Jews living at that time. And also, it's very important to mention that a very flourishing time period this time period, the late 19th century or second half of the 19th century was for the Jewish population. They contributed a great deal to Hungarian art, culture in general, music, science especially. And so it is very, very important to mention about this particular period and this particular part of the city. So here you can see the Dohan Street Synagogue, the great synagogue, which was actually built up already in the 1850s. And imagine that it is among the largest synagogues of the world. It's definitely the largest one in Europe. It's really a beautiful example of a very unique architectural style. Outside, it's a combination of Moorish and Byzantine style. And when we go inside, it's very interesting because it is quite church-like. So there is actually an interesting arrangement of very vivid colors. The Ark of Covenant looks a little bit like a main altar. There is also lots of chandeliers and balcony levels as well. So you can also see an organ, which is actually not allowed in an Orthodox synagogue. This is not an Orthodox synagogue. It is a so-called Neologue synagogue, which is not Reformed but not Orthodox either. You can see a couple of other images. And so unfortunately, later on, this real golden age for Hungary and for the Jews had changed. And before, I just would like to show you this miniature statue that is done by a local artist, and all over the city there are these miniatures, like mini statues of different topics, different famous persons. They are done by Mihály Kodolko. So going back to the time period, a lot of in the Jewish Quarter, there were all the different shops and coffee houses and restaurants. Quite a lot of the members of the Jewish community had very successful factories and manufacturers in those days. Unfortunately, all of this came to an end. Let's say before the Second World War, because already from the 1920s, anti-Semitistic laws were introduced in Hungary, 1920s, 1930s. And then when Hungary entered the Second World War, things got worse and worse. And then eventually in the springtime of 1944, the deportation had started. And during a relatively short time, almost 500,000 Hungarian Jews were deported to Auschwitz. Altogether, including those people that were deported, the ones that died in the Jewish Quarter, and also the ones that were shot in the Danube River here in Budapest, we are talking about 600,000 victims of the Holocaust. So I would like to just show you a couple of the sections. I mean, that a couple of the memorials, the commemoration. This is, for example, a plaque that commemorates that the ghetto was liberated by the Soviet army on the 18th of January 1945. This is when a lot of the bodies were buried in the garden of the synagogue. These are all people that actually were not killed but died because of the really unbearable conditions. So it's very unique that in the garden of the synagogue there is a Jewish cemetery today where more than 2,000 persons are buried. And at this point, I also would like to mention perhaps names that you are not familiar. One of them is Roel Wallenberg, a Swedish diplomat that saved tens and thousands of Hungarian Jews by issuing fake documents and fake passports and physically hiding them in the safe houses. In the garden of the synagogue, there is this memorial place where several names are listed, and the largest letters stand for Roel Wallenberg. And this entire memorial garden behind the synagogue was named after him. It's the Roel Wallenberg Memorial Garden. And here you can see this very beautiful piece of art. It's a metal weeping willow tree, and it was erected by the Emmanuel Foundation, which was founded by the American actor Tony Curtis. And it was named Emmanuel Foundation for the memory of his father, Emanuel Schwartz. So Tony Curtis was already born in the US, but he was 100% Hungarian because both of his parents were from Hungary. So this beautiful piece of art is a weeping willow tree, which already gives you this idea of sadness and sorrow. But if you turn it upside down in your imagination, this is a menorah, an upside down menorah, a Jewish candle holder. And it has lots of symbolism, like the broken parts symbolizing the lost generation. The little leaves have names of victims that perished in the Holocaust. And it is really a beautiful commemoration to those who died. And also I would like to mention the name of Karl Lutz, who was the Swiss consul in Budapest in those days. He also saved thousands and thousands of Hungarian Jews. And still today in the Jewish quarter, there is this memorial that you can see on the left-hand side, how the person who is laying on the floor is helped by, and there is a quotation from Karl Lutz over there on that stone, which says, "I am going crazy when I must make a decision who to save, where is God?" In connection with this memorial, there is also a quotation from the Talmud there, which says, "Whoever saves a life is considered as if he has saved an entire world," meaning and kind of referring to the ordinary local people that just saved one person or one Jewish family, because there had been quite a lot of people that did that also. And then another memorial that I would like to show you, it is no longer in the Jewish quarter, but it is by the river embankment, this very striking memorial, which is the Shoe Memorial, and it pays tribute to those Hungarian Jews that were taken over to the river embankment, and then they were shot into the Danube. I think it is very, very important to preserve the memory of these events. And after the Second World War, we once again come back a little bit in the course of history to the communist time period. And it is perhaps also interesting that we have still today quite a lot of the communist memorials around in Budapest. There is a place called Memento Park where quite a few of these communist memorials are collected. Of course, many of them had been just simply removed, but these are collected all together here in one place. I think it's also very important because for today's young people, communism is just a chapter in the history book. I mean, it has been more than 30 years ever since it was coming to an end. So I think it's important to have these. Here in the museum, there is a true memento of communism. It's a Trabant car, which was the product of East Germany and that was one of the available cars, very bad quality during communism. So still in the city, we do have several memorials that we have. In fact, we have two memorials that we kept from the communist time, and those are not in Memento Park, but they are in the city. This is the Liberation Monument on the top of Gellért Hill, and this was erected to commemorate the liberation of Budapest and Hungary by the Soviets. And there is also a Soviet soldier memorial, which is on the Pest side, and this is generally to pay a tribute to the Soviet soldiers. Communism was ongoing until 1989, but I just would like to dedicate a few words to an event that took place during communism in 1956. There was an uprising that broke out, and that was a desperate event to break free from communism and to regain our freedom. So it started out as a student uprising, and then eventually it became a nationwide movement. Unfortunately, the end of the uprising was a brutal crash by the Soviet Union. You can actually see how they were trying to destroy all the symbols of communism, like the huge Stalin statue is being destroyed here, taking down the statue of the Soviet soldier, taking down the Red Star. So unfortunately, during a very short period of time, it came to an end, and we have to mention that the brutal end meant that there were lots of executions. Many people were executed, including the Prime Minister of Hungary at that time, Imre Nagy. You can see him on the photo, and thousands of people were imprisoned, thousands of people escaped. Approximately 200,000 Hungarians left the country for good at that time. And I also would like to mention that quite a lot of people at that time went to the US and also Canada. I think Hungarians are kind of grateful for that ever since, because many refugees that escaped from the country eventually found their new home. And we can really kind of end the communist era by this very important image that shows the time of 1989 when the reburial funeral service of Imre Nagy took place on Hero Square. You can see that special symbol of the uprising of 1956, the national flag with the hole on it. And it really meant the end of the communist era. This flag became the symbol because the original historical coat of arms was changed into a Soviet-type symbol during the uprising, and that was the one which was cut out by the angry local people. During the decades of the 60s, 70s, and even in the 80s, it was not allowed to put any kind of commemoration to 1956, since it was considered as a counter-revolution. But after the end of communism, it became possible to erect memorials. So this, what I would like to show you here, I don't know how well you can see these little they are enlarged bullets on the wall, and they are scattered all over the wall, and they are supposed to commemorate those people that were shot dead on the square in front of the parliament building. And so basically, the end of the communist era was in 1989. We had the first free election in 1990, and just a little bit more than a decade later, Hungary entered the European Union. And at the same time, with Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Poland, Hungary joined the European Union in 2004. And I really would like to mention that ever since that time, there had been really a kind of a change, couple of events I would like to just mention to you. For example, we are hosting more than 30 years now, Formula One race. We have lots of festivals in Budapest. This is, for example, the wine festival that takes place always in the courtyard of the royal palace in the castle district during the fall, during the months of September. Also, to attract younger people, we have a huge summer music festival, the so-called Sziget Festival. Usually 500,000 people come for this event. It is 1 week long, and often people come for the entire week. And also certain parts of the city went through some kind of an interesting metamorphosis. So for example, in certain districts, in the 6th district of Budapest, we have lots of ruin bars, ruin pubs, which is a very popular place for hanging out and having a few drinks. So now in the very, very last part of the tour, we are really coming to an end now. I would like to just talk a little bit about Hungarian food, because it is also a great part of who we are here in Hungary, the Hungarian food and Hungarian drinks. So here on this photo, you can actually see the great market hall, which is a very, very traditional and authentic food market. It's a farmers market, and that is where you can come across all the fresh fruits and vegetables and all the spices and liquors and everything else. You can also come across the most traditional, let's say, street food of Hungary, which is the so-called langosh. It is actually a thick dough that they put into oil, and then it is really tasty. The very traditional way is actually not what you can see on the photo, because we traditionally don't put much of these toppings on it. It's either plain or with garlic sauce, or maybe sour cream and some sprinkled cheese. It is very, very tasty. Otherwise, welcome to the land of carbohydrate, right? In Hungary, all the meals and all the sweets as well, and all the garnish, so quite a bit of carbohydrate you can find in there. You can also come across in the market the most traditional spice, paprika powder, spicy or sweet. Also, we use a lot of garlic, and in the background you can see those jars, and they have very strong paprika seed that we also use quite a bit in the cooking. And of course, when we come to Hungarian dishes, we have to mention that lots of meat, right? Traditionally, Hungarians were nomadic people. They needed a good nourishment. So the most traditional dishes are made out of pork or beef, or also some chicken, so meat. However, you don't have to be afraid. If you come to Hungary, you will find plenty of great vegetarian options, so it is not a problem. But nowadays, the very successful restaurants, for example, try to combine the traditional recipes, the traditional flavors, but cooking with modern technology, not to use so much lard, but being a little bit on the healthier part. So here you can, of course, see the paprika powder, the very strong chili pepper type, and also the garlic. And of course, the most, let's say, well-known dish is the goulash soup, and it is something that I consider my personal mission to really make sure that everybody understands the difference between a goulash soup and a beef stew. So this is a goulash soup. It's a liquid. It's a soup. It has all sorts of ingredients, not only the beef, but also vegetables, white carrot, red carrot, potatoes. Also, some recipes have like additional small noodles to go with. So it's with liquid, and this is how a stew would look. So it doesn't have vegetables, it doesn't have that much liquid, and it is served with the little flour-based noodles. And goulash soup traditionally was cooked out in the open, in the big, open pots. And another traditional dish is stuffed cabbage, for example, or a type of chicken breast in breadcrumbs. It is similar to like how a Wiener Schnitzel would be, but we also like that very much here in Hungary. Then another Hungarian specialty is the so-called lecsó. It is actually a very healthy dish, because it has some sausage, some bacon, okay, and then in addition to that, a lot of tomato and like a bell pepper type pepper and paprika and onion. So it is very, very good, especially during the summer months. And then Hungary is very well known for goose liver. So it comes in form of like a meat stuffed with goose liver or goose liver pate. And for example, this special type of pancake, it's a thin kind of like a crepe, and it's filled with ground meat. And another traditional, maybe it sounds a little awkward, but it's a seasonal soup. It's a cold sour cherry soup. It's almost like a dessert, but we love it in Hungary. We also have the version of a cold strawberry soup, and they are very, very delicious. And then when it comes to sweets, we actually eat quite a lot of sweets with poppy seed. This is, for example, a traditional Christmas let's say cake. It's called bagli. It's like a kind of a bar, and then we slice it up and we eat it around Christmas time. Another Hungarian delicacy is the so-called chimney cake. It's originally from Transylvania, which was part of Hungary before, but it is also done and sold in many, many places in Hungary today. And all the very, very excellent cakes. For example, this is Zserbo cake. And we also have a coffee house by the same name, which used to be, and it's still existing, coffee house today. And it used to be the meeting point of the aristocracy in Budapest. And then another Hungarian delicacy is the marzipan. As you can see, it comes in all sorts of different forms and shapes and flavors as well. And something that you can only find in Hungary, and I really recommend to try in case you come. The closest I could come in description is that it's a kind of a sweet cottage cheese or curd bar, which is chocolate coated, and it is really, really delicious. Lots of Hungarians have it as a kind of an obsession. It is called Túró Rudi, and it is really a typical Hungarian treat. And talking about Hungarian cuisine, of course, we must mention the wine culture, the wine regions. In Hungary, we have excellent wines. If we have to decide between wine and beer, we would go much rather to be called as a wine country. And we have lots of excellent wines, but out of all of them, I would mention to you the Tokai Asszú. It's actually a sweet dessert wine. As you can see it on the photo, this wine has, I mean, the wine is made out of the raisin-like grapes partially, so it becomes very sweet, and it has a beautiful golden color. It is called the king of the wines and the wine of the kings. It is really, really an excellent quality. And then we have another alcoholic drink, which is very, very popular in Hungary, and that's the palinka. And even though there is a range for the alcohol content, but what we really prefer is the one which is closer to 50%, so very strong. It's a fruit palinka, and there is the plum, the sour cherry, the apricot, lots of different versions that are made out of different fruits. And then there is the unicum, which is really very unique. It is made out of different herbs and spices, and it has a very bitter taste. It's a stomach bitter, but it has a really very good, it's for digestion. So people have a glass of this before meals, or if they have an upset stomach. So it is really very popular in Hungary. So we are really coming to the end of the tour presentation, and I would just like to show you a couple of nice pictures, because I think it's part of the experience when you visit Budapest, to enjoy the beautiful lights of the city. So I just wanted to show you a couple of the emblematic buildings of the city. You can see Andrashi Avenue here around Christmas time, St. Stephen's Basilica as well. And also there is the Royal Palace. So the view is really very, very beautiful. All the bridges, all the buildings are lit up. And So it is really part of the experience to see the very nice lightings of the city. And so before we would end the presentation, I would like to just play a little bit of Hungarian music to you. And so I would like to mention the name of Johannes Brahms, the German composer. I mean, he was obviously not Hungarian, but he had very close relationship with Hungarian people, Hungarian musicians, and it was somehow his personal mission to preserve somehow the Hungarian folk music through music. So he incorporated it very often in his music pieces. So I would like to just play a very short part of Johannes Brahms' Hungarian dance, number 5, and that would be the end of our tour together. And of course, after that, I will be ready for the presentation. So thank you so much for your kind attention, and I am ready for the Q&A.
All right, so I am so excited. Thank you so much, Andrea. What a wonderful view of Budapest. I actually want to tell everybody that I was so excited about Budapest as I was planning this with Andrea, and we were going over all of the sites and the places to visit. And when she showed me all of those lights and at Christmas time, so of course we're going to do a Christmas market tour that ends in Budapest in 2022. And hopefully we will have our friend Andrea there waiting for us at the end to give us a formal tour of her city. I know that, you know, to be in person is so much different. So we want to translate everything we learned today into actually going on a tour with you in person. So thank you very much for that. So very much information. That's what everybody says always in the chat and in the Q&A, is that even if they've ever been to Budapest before, they learn so much more from you. So thank you very much for bringing all that to us. At this time, I will transition us over to the Q&A. If you want to just open that up on your screen and we can start with that. Before we get into it, I do want to mention, I know that the tides are turning in the sense that we are starting to think about physical travel again. I know that as more people get vaccinated, hopefully there will be more opening opportunities for us to travel. So in light of that, I am giving you a list of my group tours that are coming up in the future. So take a look at them and visit our website. And also, if you're looking for something that's not on the list, please contact me and I can help you get there. So Andrea, if you are ready, we can hop over to the Q&A and we can address some of the questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Mara. And once again, thank you for this wonderful opportunity. I was really so excited to come on the tour, and I'm sorry that it was a little bit longer than I have planned, but you know, you can really get carried away with trying to explain as much as possible. So I'm just going to jump right over to the Q&A. First question is, how easy or difficult it is to get from Hungary to border countries besides Austria? Are there trains? Yes, my answer is that it's very, very easy to travel. I mean, just to give you an idea, Vienna, for example, is a very smooth 3 hours ride from Budapest, but you can also get to Prague in about 6 hours. You can get to Bratislava in about 2 hours. So it's really very, very well connected. If you are planning to go down further, let's say to Croatia, you can do that also. And so basically it has a very, very good location for these kind of travels. So another question is going on about beautiful landscape and how big is movie industry. Well, movie industry is huge in Hungary, especially in Budapest. There are lots of movies that were made or are being made in Hungary, and that is due to several reasons. Just very quickly to wrap it up, it's due to the fact that Budapest has beautiful architecture. Often we appear in the movies as not Budapest, but other cities, right? Berlin, Paris, Vienna, all sorts of other cities because of the architectural style. It's such a kind of a mixture of the architectural style. And also the Hungarian government wants to attract filming. So it's very, very good kind of incentives are given to make filming. So yes, we have lots of movies that were made here. I was able to visit Hollókő when I was in Budapest in 2019. Is that often included in tours of the city? Yes, Hollókő is a very beautiful small village, and you can reach it in like 1.5 hours from Budapest. So it can be done as a day trip, and I really recommend it. What time of the year is best to visit Budapest in terms of weather or activities? So I would say that it is absolutely great time to come between the spring and the fall, depends on what you like. The 2 months I would probably not come is July and August. It's very hot. It's very similar to other European countries and cities. We have a kind of a hot summer you know, like days, and but of course there are advantages of that too, because then a lot I mean, of course there is no school, 2.5 months of summer holiday for the kids, so many people are away, so then the city is also less crowded, we can say. Then it's also very, very nice to come around Christmas time. So Christmas is magical in the city. To the already magical lighting, we add all what you can imagine. It's beautiful. And that is a great time also to come on, for example, on a river cruise ship, because then during the limited amount of time that you are here, you can just have less time on traveling, and you can just easily come by. We have wonderful Christmas markets as well. So I would say the only 2 months I would not really recommend is January and February, because it's really cold usually and quite freezing as well. What is the Jewish population of Budapest? Is there much anti-Semitism? So today's, let's say, estimated Jewish population would be around 80,000. Again, we don't have exact numbers, right? So 80,000, and I would say that about anti-Semitism, unfortunately, as it happens in many places, you can come across this. I really would like to think and hope that all those memorials that we have, you know, in Budapest and in many other places, really kind of prevents anti-Semitism, because people are aware of how things happened in the past. Another question, how large is the Sea of Hungary? What depth does it reach? So it's actually 77 kilometers long, and it's the average depth is like 2 or 3 meters. So it's very shallow, so it really gets warm in the summertime, and that's why it's such a popular holiday resort, not just for local people, but many people come here. In fact, during the communist time period, it was actually the place where the separated East German and West German families used to meet with each other. So who created the instrument, the cymbalon? not sure of the spelling. So actually, I think it comes from really like traditionally from the gypsies. So it's not let's say an artificially made instrument, but it's actually an interesting question. I never thought of that. I will have to look into that. Who made the cimbalom? But it really is a very important you know, music instrument of all the gypsy bands. So my father was first generation Hungarian in the US. And he said every time that I had a gypsy in my soul. Are they negatively viewed? So, you know, it's a very complex issue, and I really try to kind of be, let's say, quick on this. So because there are so many questions and I'm so happy about it. So gypsy population had been part of Hungarian society the last 600 years, right? So practically we can say that they came originally from India, and traditionally for hundreds of years they were traveling. They had all their special professions, and within the gypsy society there was a kind of let's say a kind of caste, the gypsy musicians. And if I really want to tell you, I mean, why wouldn't I want to tell you so? I mean, I really want to tell you what is the, let's say, present day situation. It's very difficult because the percentage of Roma population is growing within the society, but traditionally there are issues with which the gypsy population has to deal with, and that is the under-education or the lack of possibility to find good jobs because of the lack of education. The traditional jobs they used to have, they no longer have. So it is quite difficult. And I do have a question in connection also with this. How did so many gypsies survive the Holocaust? I mean, I really will tell you this, and it may sound very, very brutal to say, but only it is the lack of time. And the lack of time is also the answer for how come that relatively so many Jews survived the Holocaust, and that was that relatively the deportations in Hungary started late. So in the springtime of 1944, so active, oh, terrible to say, but actively the deportations took place for 4.5 months. And during that time, they deported close to 500,000 Jews, and they only started to deport also gypsies towards the end of this period. And practically because of the lack of time, Jews survived and relatively less gypsies were deported, but also gypsies were deported from Hungary. Can you share more information with me about the lace and fabric industry? Yes, it's very interesting that, well, in Hungary, traditionally, we used to have a very, very wonderful fabric industry, but nowadays these kind of like laces and embroideries that I showed you, obviously they are only made by some of the like older generation. They cannot be made in like machine made or in factories. So we are trying our best to kind of make sure that these are not dying out, because now it's very, very time consuming. Those kind of flower embroideries that I showed you, it takes a long time to do it well. And of course, they come in all kind of colors, and with the quality, and of course, the price when you buy these also would depend on the quality of the fabric and also the quantity of the actual embroidery. So it's a very, very important tradition that we want to preserve, but it's actually very, very difficult because less and less people know how to do these embroideries. So do most Hungarians speak another language? Well, I only wish I could say yes. But my answer is that, well, again, we are trying, but unfortunately, now I would say that for the younger generation, it's easier because of the internet, because of music and everything. But otherwise, still a lot of people don't speak foreign languages. German used to be traditionally like a second language, since we were for such a long time under Habsburg rule. And of course, in the last 20-30 years, English is more chosen to use as a foreign language. However, when you come to Budapest, you don't have to be afraid. Because of the lack of your Hungarian knowledge, you will manage with English in most places, so you don't have to be worried about that. With the question is whether we can still pay with the older currency. I mean, with that older currency that I showed you, you cannot pay, because that went out in 1946, and that was called the penge. So now we have the Hungarian forint. Yes, and there is a question in connection with that. How much could that trillion penge buy you back then? Well, this story, I know it from my grandmother, that she was saying that one of these bills, you could just get, let's say, a dozen of eggs in the morning, but by the evening, you couldn't buy those anymore because it was worthless. So that's why they were walking around on the streets, and people were sweeping the banknotes on the street. It was worthless. It was worth absolutely nothing. How would you pronounce Sunny-Slow? So Sunny-Slow is a name. That is why how you would pronounce authentic Hungarian pronunciation from me, Sunny-Slow. What is a formal potato? Formal potato is when you go to a grocery store, you would use one of the words that I put you there for potato, and informal is just when you, for example, that informal word or folk word was actually from a gypsy origin, but now also other people use it. So that was just to demonstrate that even for potato, we use 3 different words. What is the cost of living now in Budapest? How much would a lunch, sandwich, and a sit-down dinner cost? Okay, so what I really would like to mention that comparing to other like European capitals, Budapest is very reasonable. So it's not a cheap city anymore. It used to be very cheap, but it's not cheap anymore, but it's reasonable. You can get kind of good value for your money. And so basically, let's say like you can kind of get by, you can get for $10, let's say you can have a nice lunch in the market, or let's say if it would be obviously a very nice dinner in a fine dining restaurant would be, let's say, $200, but also, for example, to give you an idea, when you buy a public transportation pass, let's say for 3 days, you would pay something like again, like $12, or if you would have like a museum entry ticket, it would be $1 or $5. So I mean, it's really kind of reasonable, and the cost of living is also much lower than in quite a lot of other European cities. So, for example, to rent an Airbnb flat or to rent a flat for a month, it would be really reasonable. Can you explain more about name day? Do you mean there is a different first name that's honored each day of the year, like Peter Day, Mark Day? Exactly. This is the way how it is. So we have in the calendar, for example, my name is Andrea, and so my name day is on the 18th of April, right? And so then we celebrate it. So family members give presents and flowers, and there's a little get together, and that is our name day. And then, of course, there are some names that are adopted, like Western names, that they don't have a name day. Let's suppose it happens. In that case, the person or the parents of that child will pick a date. Usually, in that case, we would pick a date which would be far away from the birthday, right? So it would not be together. So there would be always something to look forward to. So for travelers visiting Budapest on their own, is it better, more economical to stay on the Buda side or the Pest side? Very good question, and I would say definitely I would recommend the Pest side, because the Pest side is the hustling, bustling city center. That is where there are the majority of the restaurants, the cafes, more like the city feel to it. And on the Buda side, it's more residential. I mean, in the historical quarter, in the castle district, there are not an awful lot of hotels. And also it is very quiet, you know, after the busy day is gone. So of course, it depends what you would like. But I would say that to stay on the Pest side is better, because then you are closer to everything. When do you expect Hungary's border to open? So the chances of me telling this to you now is lower than winning the lottery. Unfortunately, no idea at this moment. We are not sure. I mean, I think that pretty much it will be close to when the rest of European countries will open up, because I think we are in it together, let's say. So we will see, hopefully soon. Is it safe for single women travelers to walk around Budapest? Is there a safer, not so safe side? So I wouldn't say that there is a not so safe side. I would say that it's very much a safe city. Central area, central districts, Pest side, also the castle district. Very often visitors say that they do feel the police presence. You can see policemen every now and then on the streets. I would really say that when Budapest started to become really like a kind of a hot spot, like 20 years ago, then we did have like cases with like pickpockets and things like that. But even those are kind of improving in the last couple of years, and it is really considered as a very safe city nowadays. So I would be completely comfortable with walking around in different parts of the city, even alone. There are some districts further out where probably I would not go alone. So my grandfather's name was Sándor Nagy. In trying to trace by my ancestors in Hungary, I was told that half the country is named Nagy. Is this true? I have to disappoint you. It is true. The name Nagy, it's like Taylor or Smith in English, right? So we do have a couple of surnames like Nagy. I mean, nowadays nobody produces phone books anymore, but when phone books were this thick, they had this many pages of Nagy inside. So it doesn't help. More information is needed to trace down family heritage. The name Nagy is not enough. The name Sándor is also quite common, or was very common in those days. One question. My great-grandparents came to the US from Hungary in the early 1900s. Census records say their language was Magyar. What does that mean? Okay, so Magyar means Hungarian in Hungarian language. So the funny thing is that we call ourselves Hungary, right? I mean, in English it's called Hungary, but in Hungarian, Hungary is not called Hungary. It's called Magyar Ország. Magyar means Hungarian in Hungarian language. Ország means country. So it's the country of the Magyars. So the word Magyar, anything that is Hungarian, Magyar language, Hungarian language, Magyar food, Hungarian food. So that is what it meant. So that is why they put it into the paperwork, that they speak Magyar, which means they spoke Hungarian, right? Is the capital Budapest? Yes, the capital is Budapest. And perhaps I forgot to mention this during the presentation, but Budapest is the only large city in Hungary. So we are a country of 10 million inhabitants. 2 million people live here in Budapest. And imagine that in the second largest city of Hungary, we have under 200,000, right? So nothing in between, no other cities of 500,000 or 1 million. It's the big city, the big metropolis, Budapest, the capital of Hungary. And then we have a few other cities with around 180,000, 190,000. And then we have quite a lot of others with 30, 40, 50,000 bigger towns. And then we have also lots of very small villages. Question: why does the Hungarian flag no longer has St. Stephen's cross on it? I have seen the flag with both, but curious as to why it is no longer carried on the flag. Very good question. It can be on it. So basically, Hungarian flag can be without the coat of arms and with the coat of arms as well. So both is still around. In many places, we have just the one with the 3 stripes. And going back to the 1956 revolution, that was when I had mentioned that the former historical coat of arms had to be changed to a very ugly kind of a Soviet type with the hammer and the sickle kind of coat of arms. And that was the coat of arms that was cut out from the flag. That's why the flag with the hole on it became the symbol of the uprising. And then eventually later on, the historical coat of arms was put back, but even with it or without it, it is okay to use. What are the main industries of Hungary? What is the best way to get around Budapest? Drive, walk, or public transit? Okay, so in Hungary, one of the most important source of let's say, revenue is the agricultural activities. It goes back to the long time, to even to the imperial times. During the Habsburg times, Hungary was considered as the food basket of the entire Habsburg Empire. And even today, we export lots of great agricultural products. We also have a lot of assembly factories, car factories, manufacturers. We produce lots of cars. These are not Hungarian brands, but other brands like we have, for example, Suzuki and Opel, and quite a lot of manufacturers also. Hungarians call their country Magyarország, but where did the word Hungary, Hungarian come from? You know, this is actually a kind of an issue that many people would argue again day and night. It's also some kind of a topic that is similar to where we originally came from. So it comes from the Latin word of Hungaria, and that was how was in the old inscriptions, how it was referred to. Also, then there is some kind of a faraway relationship, distance relationship between the Huns and the Hungarians. We do have some legends that support this, but nowadays they also say that it was not that way. So practically the word for Hungary comes from the Latin word of Hungaria. So how it is that so many of the older buildings and castles survived world wars? Has there been much reconstruction involved? Well, I really have to tell you that, especially in the case of Budapest, we cannot talk about survival because we think that approximately 2/3 of the buildings in the city were gone during the Second World War, and the rest of the buildings were also very, very badly damaged. So what you see, or what you saw during the presentation in the Castle District, is the result of the renovation and restoration. It's very important to mention that after the Second World War, people were so desperate to start their lives again. And I heard so many stories about this from my grandmother, who actually lived through the bombings of the city with 2 little children in the bomb shelter. One of the little children was my father, who was 3 years old at the time, and my aunt, who was a 6-month-old baby. So she was telling me that after all the years of the war and after the terrible devastation, people were so happy that it's over, that it can be a new start, that practically everybody was participating in the renovation, in cleaning up the city. 5 years after the end of the war, Chain Bridge was already reopened. And of course, it took a very long time to restore everything, but they actually did a lot of restoration. Of course, part of the story is that to restore it really to that beauty, what you have seen before, we really needed also the last 25, 30 years, ever since a lot of renovation had been carried out. Is St. Stephen in Budapest is the same saint as St. Stephen Cathedral in Vienna? The answer is no. Our St. Stephen was the first king of Hungary. He became the king of Hungary in the year 1000. and he founded the Hungarian state and converted the Hungarians into Christianity. Meanwhile, St. Stephen's in Vienna is an early martyr of Christianity that was actually stoned to death. Is it feasible to road cycle around Lake Balaton? Where else in Hungary would you recommend for road cyclists to cycle? Yes, Lake Balaton is a wonderful place to cycle around. In fact, there is a road to cycle around. And so this is practically the best place where you can go. I really would recommend it. What bird is the legend shown by the museum? Okay, so that big bird is the so-called Turul bird. It is actually, it looks a little bit like an eagle, but it's not an eagle. We don't really know whether it really existed in real life. According to the legend, when the Hungarian tribes were migrated from the Ural mountain range here, they were kind of escorted by this Turul bird, and every time the bird dropped the sword, they settled and rested. And apparently, when they got here to present-day territories of Hungary, the Turul bird dropped the sword and never wanted to pick it up again. So, according to the legend, that was the way how Hungarians conquered the land. As a side note, I would just say that often we say, oh, we wish that bird would have continued a couple of 100 miles more to the west, because we would have avoided lots of problems in our history, because Hungarians managed to settle down in a part of Europe, which was very much a kind of a crossroad, and everybody wanted this land. And so that's why we had all this storm in our history. Where is the Tomb of Gul Baba? So the Tomb of Gul Baba is on the Buda side, up on the hillside. And as I mentioned, it is beautifully, it has been beautifully renovated. And it's very unusual to have such, on the northern part, let's say northern part of Europe, to have a pilgrimage place for the Ottomans. But we have that. And basically, we are very proud of this Turkish heritage. What about communist rule? Impact on Jewish quarter? The Jewish quarter, together with lots of other parts of the city, really kind of got into a kind of a neglected shape, so to say. So that's why a lot of renovation was needed there. And still today, the rehabilitation of the Jewish quarter is still going on, although it became a very exciting area of the city, because it has a mixture of all that Jewish heritage. Besides Dohan Street Synagogue, there are 2 other synagogues there. And also lots of restaurants and bars, and a lot of the ruined bars can be found also there in that area. Why is it called Chain Bridge? So the name Chain Bridge is a referral to the fact that originally the stone pillars were supported by chains. So it is a referral to the structure of the bridge. So that was how it was built up. After the restoration of the Second World War, the chains were put inside a kind of a cast, so we don't see them anymore. But when it is lit up in the evening, there are so many lights on it, so that it looks like a pearl of chain. What are the Hungarians' opinion of attitude towards Austrians today? Do they feel like they are cousins of sorts, or would they feel offended if someone mentions that connection under one empire previously? Well, I must tell you that more time passes by since a certain era, the better you think about it, right? And that's so true for this time period. We really have a wonderful, great relationship with Austria today. And just exactly how you described it, we do have a certain extent of nostalgia, how we look back on not the Habsburg time period, I mean the Habsburg Empire time period, but the Austro-Hungarian Monarchy time period, when Hungary had that golden age, very flourishing time. We do have that kind of feel for the common history and traditions, and yes, a certain extent of nostalgia. How much is admission to the bath usually? So I would say that an average kind of entry ticket for like a day pass to go to the spa would be about $15 US, so that would be the amount you would pay, and then that would entitle you to use all the pools, the indoor pools, the outdoor pools, all the sauna, the jacuzzi pool, the hot tubs, obviously, and then you can sign up for a massage, and that would be an extra. So that would be the amount that you would pay. Is there a competition between the Buddha and the Pest side? I saw a sign on a wall in one of your slides that said Pest Buddha. Yes, definitely there is a kind of a rivalry. So obviously those who live on the Buddha side would say that yes, Buddha is the only place to live. Other people that live on the Pest side would prefer to the Pest side. So generally saying, we can say that the Buddha side is more expensive. Obviously, just like in any big cities, up on the high hillside, there are the most expensive, most exclusive areas. And that would be the very elegant, like posh areas of the city. And also they are in big demand, because the Buddha side is much smaller, right? Does Hungary have a reliable, safe, modern train system? And is it part of the URL pass system? Definitely, it is part of it. And definitely the way to travel is by the train. The international trains are of very good quality. They are air conditioned, they are clean, they are fast. I mentioned before that in less than 3 hours you are traveling from Budapest to Vienna, and it's very smooth and very, very good. Is public transportation still free for people over 65 years old? Yes and no. It is free above 65 years old for European Union citizens. Yes, for them it is free. For people outside of the European Union, you have to pay. The most reasonable price that you can actually get for 15 US, you get actually a 1-week pass. And that's the most economical. It is good for everything, for all the trams and for the underground, the metro. One thing is excluded, and that's the funicular, the little cable car that goes up to the top of the hill, but all the other things you can use. Do you think the river cruises will ever be allowed to bring back the Illumination tour in Budapest? It was such a delight. I think, well, obviously you refer to the fact that nowadays the big cruise ships are not allowed to do the round tour to see the lit up city. I don't think so. I think that it is actually done, only that the passengers get on board of smaller ships and they still get to see the lit up city, which is really breathtaking. You really would assume that, well, what is the difference? I'm either on the Buddha side, on the Pest side. No, from the river, it's a totally different perspective. So I really recommend it to everybody. And so if you come on a cruise ship on a trip, then they would like transfer you to smaller ships and you would still see the lit up city. I would be interested in knowing if most people own their own homes or apartments or mostly rentals. What would be an average home price in Budapest? Yes, you are very welcome. Yes, so it's very interesting that when communism was coming into Hungary, then all of the private property was confiscated, right? So everything was taken away from the private owners, and Hungary went into state ownership. And you would think that in such a country, people are not interested in becoming the owners, right? Because they have that, let's say, bad experience. But it's actually the contrary. Even during the communist time period in the late 70s, early 80s, private property was reintroduced in Hungary. So people had the chance to buy their property off the state. In some funny cases, they bought the same places that was theirs originally, that was confiscated. And of course, by now, most everybody would be into owning their property. And again, what I can tell you that real estate prices are nowhere close to be, or okay, not nowhere, but not up that level what there would be generally in, let's say, Western European countries. Of course, the real estate prices are going up, but it's still very reasonable. If you are asking this because of investment, you are a little bit late, because many people discovered this like 20 years ago when it was a huge business. Many foreigners actually own flats and apartments in Budapest, because like some 20 years ago, in a matter of couple of years, they doubled and tripled, and it went up like crazy. But it's actually still a good investment today. How long did it take to build the parliament? So the parliament building took 19 years to build up, which I think is incredible, because it's really huge. It has the 4 floors and almost 700 rooms. So it was really a huge undertaking. During the first 1 year, all they did was they were putting down wooden pipes to make sure to have like a steady foundation for the building. I have Hungarian ancestors as well in Budapest, Mandok, which is in northeast Hungary, close to Ukraine. Any idea how I could research them in person in Budapest? What I would recommend is that there are actually quite a lot of Hungarian agencies that are specialized in trying to gain information for you. I think that is the best way to do, because unless you speak Hungarian, it's very difficult to like dig in the archives, because obviously there's all the birth certificates and papers, everything is in Hungarian. So without the Hungarian knowledge, it would be very difficult. So I would really start out with that. So if you are interested, I can give a couple of names to Mara, and then she can forward those to you. And there are some really excellent agencies that are specialized in trying to look for the Hungarian heritage.
Andrea, I think that might be a good transition to say that we will be sharing a little bit of resources that you've put together. So tomorrow on our follow-up email, I will include the resources that Andrea has put together for you, so that you can go and learn a little bit more about Budapest and Hungary. I think that after 2.5 full hours of talking, I am going to give you a little bit of rest. And even though we have more questions in the queue, I think we're never going to get to the bottom of them. So I'm going to I'm going to draw the line at this point and say that thank you everybody for coming out tonight or today for this virtual tour presentation, and so many thanks to you, Andrea. I know you would have gone on for 3 more hours because I could see the passion in you, but I think that to be kind enough and to be considerate of your time, I want to also say thank you to you and draw this to a close.
Yes, thank you so much, Mara. And I really hope to welcome some of our viewers one day in Budapest. And I hope to see you here next year when you are coming over. And once again, thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity to show many people Budapest and Hungary. And I really hope that you enjoyed it. And I wish a wonderful day to all the viewers. And thank you again for this great opportunity. Goodbye to everyone.
We certainly did. Thank you so much. And everybody, we'll see you next week.